Good afternoon, I'm Matteo Mancini, and this microphone really doesn't work, but you can hear me, right? Yes. Okay. So I'm going to talk about how to use image-to-image translation to accomplish a kind of very complicated registration that is the registration between histology and MRI. Just a brief outline. I will talk just a little bit about me to let you understand why I had the chance and I picked it to work on this, and what are the problems of registering MRI and histology. And then, of course, since we are in the golden era of deep learning, I will talk about GANs, and more GANs. And I will show you some preliminary results. I apologize in advance if they will be just qualitative results. The quantitative will arrive soon. So my background is in brain connectivity. My PhD was in brain connectivity, and I started from functional connectivity, doing some graph measures. And then I applied it to non-invasive brain stimulation, such as transcranial direct current stimulation, transcranial magnetic stimulation, and then I decided to focus a bit more on the model underlying this, that is the network model, and try to see what we can actually describe using a network model of the brain and all the MRI modalities we can acquire. And then I had the chance to work on MRI histology, and I picked it as soon as I could, because I think that there are two big issues in neuroimaging that we need to overcome to push the boundaries of what we can understand about the brain. The first one is that the main tools that we are using today, if we are lucky, they are from a decade ago. If we are not lucky, they are from the 90s. And since they were thought to be used with the MRI technology of that time, we are still underusing what we can do with the current MRI data that we have. And even if we take this into account and we start building better tools, the issue is that MRI will never manage to get to image the singular cellular structure in vivo, as well as never get to reconstruct probably a real connectome. So what we need probably is to combine MRI with something that focuses on something different, like histology. So if we say that for MRI the aim is to have a picture of the brain, of the whole brain, where we can highlight some structures of interest and some feature of pathologies, probably when we look at histology instead, we are looking at a total different thing. That is, we are looking at a very small specimen, and we have a very strong hypothesis probably, and we have a higher resolution, but again, we are paying the price that we are losing the rest of the brain. So, of course, the first idea here would be, let's just combine histology and MRI, but then it starts the nightmare, because even if we use them, if you use histology as a whole without any help from MRI, we will be in trouble, because even if we slice in a proper way the brain, it will be a nightmare to actually reconstruct the jigsaw puzzle. You need to just think that if you slice the brain in slices of half a centimeter, then the technicians will manage to cut them in more than 30 or 40 pieces, and good luck to reconstruct the jigsaw puzzle. If we help ourselves using both MRI and histology, maybe we have some chances, hopefully. But of course we need to take into account the fact that they are very different modalities, they have a completely different contrast, and histology have its own kind of beasts that are the histology-related artifacts. So what I focused in these last 4 months is trying to figure out how to register in a meaningful way MRI and histology. And as you can see already from just these two sample pictures from the Allen Atlas project, where you can see that on the right the MRI looks fine. The histology on the left has two cracks. And you can see that the cerebellum in the MRI and the cerebellum in histology have completely different aspects. And the registration by itself, of course, we need to use an affine and a nonlinear, and it won't be great. So what we should do? We can use synthesis to actually aid image registration, because even usually we think of synthesis to emulate some modalities that we didn't acquire. Another chance of using synthesis is actually trying to adjust a contrast that we don't have in our modality, and then do the actual registration and reducing the problem of a very complicated intermodality registration to an intramodality registration. And of course, I will talk about GANs. In this case, I don't think that the fame that it gained is not deserved. Maybe someone will have a different opinion about other deep learning techniques. In the case of GANs, as a generative models, they have quite a lot of advantages. For instance, designing the generator function has very few restrictions. You don't need to think about Markov chains, so you don't need to think about if the problem of the Markov chain is tractable or not. And of course, as you probably know, what we need to do is to train not one but two networks. One is the generator and the other one is the discriminator. And then the fundamental idea is taken from game theory, and we intuitively want to balance the cost optimization of the generator and the cost optimization of the discriminator. Of course, it's not all gold, and we have some disadvantages that we will see later, how it will affect what I'm exploring with the registration between histology and MRI, and they are mostly the problem that they may not converge, and then we need to think why they are not converging. Even when they converge, you need to be careful about choosing the number of epochs, because you can have a lot of oscillations. So even if the losses seem to have reached a minimum, they will go up. And mode collapse, so for two different inputs, you may learn the same output. And I put here dark arcs, let's say third supervision. Supervision, semi-supervision, because in the most simple implementation of the GANs, you actually need to train first the discriminator and then the generator and so on, and you will need actual data to train them on. I need to clarify dark arts. So Young Goodfellow talked about dark arts referring to adversarial approaches used for criminal attacks. In this case, I'm referring to the fact that unlike other deep learning approaches, it's very hard to actually tune the parameters and to do a kind of a grid search. I tried one and I showed later how it ended. But let's overcome first the issue of that supervised thing. Since a lot has improved in GANs, we have a lot of variations on them. And in this case, we will focus on CycleGANs that they seem to be taught just for this problem, since for the people that never saw this picture, it's kind of amazing. For the people that already saw this picture, it's pretty boring, I know, and I apologize. But the idea is that we are transferring the contrast from two different domains. So we have a zebra and we make it look like a horse. We have an apple, we make it look like an orange. And it's very interesting because it's very loosely supervised, so because we just need data that are divided into classes. They don't need to be paired. That is a great advantage. And it's a method that has been already used in medical imaging, mostly for synthesizing CT from MRI and vice versa. And as probably you will know, the variation from the vanilla GANs is that now you have two discriminators and two generators, and at each epoch you are training all of them. So what you want to do is to train first a generator from domain A to domain B, let's say, since we will talk about it, from MRI to histology. Then you will have a discriminator that will say if the fake histology actually looks like real histology. Then you are transforming back MRI, fake histology into actual MRI, and you are introducing the cycle consistency loss. That is, the actual MRI reconstructed from the fake histology needs to be the same. In other case, it means that something has gone weird. It's a very good constraint, and it works very well. Of course, there are some issues with CycleGANs because they are not perfect. For instance, if you are learning the mapping between two domains, and one of these domains is an actual labeling domain, like in the classical peaks-to-peaks scenario, you can have a permutation effect where you switch a label with the other. And when you have a lot of geometric changes, they usually don't learn a good mapping. So, the first thing that one should try, of course, is just CycleGAN. We had the Allen MRI and histology dataset, so we started training the CycleGAN to map the histology to the MRI, and the idea was to train in the end a generator that was able to get the histology and then generate a fake MRI, and then at that point registering the fake MRI with the real MRI, just intramodality registration, and we will have the registered histology. Of course, since we are learning both the mappings, this will work also using a real MRI and obtaining a fake histology, and so on. This is the classic PyTorch implementation with the 9 blocks ResNet and the patch GANs and discriminators. And let's see what happens. At first glimpse, I think they look nice, but the problem is that we have a cerebellum and we don't have a zebra. So what happens is that since when you invert the white and black stripes on a zebra, it's still a zebra. If you invert the white matter and the gray matter in the lines of the cerebellum, it's not anymore a normal cerebellum, it's something that is wrong. And this, of course, causes a lot of problem to the actual registration, so we need to come up with something to actually constrain even more the training. But if we want to constrain even more the training using some added semantics, the problem is that we risk to have, again, a supervised approach where we need to actually either manually label or either training another network to do the task for us. But since we are working in neuroimaging, we are lucky because we can still keep this approach very loosely supervised using one of the many segmentation toolbox that we have. In this case, we adapted SPM-like software to work with ex vivo data. And we use a system very similar to what Yuan Kai Ho from Vanderbilt University presented this year at ISBI, is that we are adding a fifth network. This time is a segmentation network. So it's the same idea, so we are still trying all these networks for each epoch, but then when we generate the fake histology, what we are going to do is train the additional network to actually segment the histology, and then we will calculate the two-dimensional cross-entropy with the real segmentation from the actual MRI data that we can easily compute, and we'll add this to the actual total losses. So it's a bit more complicated, but not that much. And just to add that we used another ResNet for segmentation, and let's see how it performs. So here I actually wouldn't need to highlight anything because we already can see what is wrong, and this is here. So first, what it happens is that sometimes the subcortical structures or some gyri will start to be rendered with the same contrast of the cerebellum in histology. And this is because, of course, neither the generator or the discriminator are able to understand that is just a cerebellum that looks like that. They don't know what a cerebellum is. And the second problem that actually is more common in normal CycleGANs is that in the background we have an artifact. This is because the discriminator is not trained to distinguish artifacts in the background, because it will just be classified as background. So what we can do, we won't add a sixth network, I promise. But we will add another term to the actual loss function, and this time we will take into account the background. So we will check that the background between the fake histo and the real MRI is the same. And then we will also add another two labels to the segmentation that we were using for the MRI. That is, we are segmenting not anymore just gray matter and white matter, but gray matter, white matter, cerebellum, white matter, cerebellum, gray matter. In this way, we should be able, if we train the segmentation network properly, to avoid the problem of having a random piece of cerebellum where we know that there's no cerebellum. So I used this approach, and then I wanted to fine-tune it, and I tried to a grid search to adjust for the number of epochs and for the weighting factors and for other things, and I'm showing them so small because the observation is that grid search like this in CycleGANs is very hard, because you are not very able to understand what is happening, because if you look just at the loss plot, you will think that when the losses are minimal, you should have a good result. But then if you go to look at the images, it can be the case that the network has overfitted, because of course in our scenario the training data and the test data is the same, but that's not the problem, because it is our goal to actually learn something that is specific to the data set we are analyzing. This is the final CycleGAN that I settled down with, at least for the moment, so 50 epochs with constant lengthening rate, then starting the decay, and this is how it looks like in just the cortex. I think it looks really nice. And then some comparison with using just registration, nonlinear registration with NIFT-Reg. Now, if you look at it like this, it cannot look that bad, but first I would like to highlight these points where you can see that something was wrong, while when you look at the transition from the real histology to the real MRI, it's very smooth in the case of the CycleGAN. And also, to be honest, I need to acknowledge the fact that for the CycleGANs, in terms of registration, we could use in the nonlinear registration a spacing of just 5 voxels. For the NIFT-Reg, we use 20 voxels, and I'm not showing you the 5 voxel one because it didn't look like a brain. And as a final qualitative result, this is the CycleGAN registration approach applied to the histological labels in the Allen Atlas, and they are then propagated on the MRI. Since there's still margin to work both on the CycleGANs and both on the registration, I think as preliminary results they look nice. There's still some shift between when you look at the actual gray matter segmentation, but in terms of the subcortical structure, the alignment was really nice. So conclusion, of course, the first thing I will do tomorrow, not tomorrow because it's Saturday, but on Monday, is going on with the quantitative results. We have some manually placed landmarks, and we will be able to actually quantify the displacement that is wrong. And then I will go on and try to refine the CycleGAN and the nonlinear registration. In particular, for the CycleGAN, I would like to achieve something that is more meaningful in terms of what the parameters could have been. And then for the far future, combining the 2D slices to make a 3D volume and an histological atlas, hopefully. And with this, I want to thank you for the attention, thank my team, and I will be happy to answer questions. Thank you.